welcome to the Goodbye Good Girl podcast. I talk with my guests all about what I call next level empowerment, breaking all the social shoulds, breaking all the rules that especially keep us women thinking I have to do it right, and the right is not even the way that I put into action. So we are breaking free, and I have with me today somebody who has quickly become a soul sister of mine. Her name is Michelle Manley. Welcome, Michelle. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Me too.
And she warned me she has a dog in the background. I have cat in the background, so you might get the fur experience. I'm just saying. I'm going to read you an introduction about Michelle, who is a Soma spiritual mentor. I love that. She's a Reiki master teacher, a Jungian tarot reader. Want to hear more about that? And multi-dimensional healer with a unique approach that blends somatic embodiment, energy work, metaphysics, and deep mindset transformation. Yes, Queen, yes. As an overcomer of time in a cult, an abusive marriage, and debilitating chronic pain, Michelle has reclaimed her sovereignty and now guides others in doing the same. She helps her diverse clients cultivate a deeper relationship with self and find their unique equilibrium. As a queer and neurodiverse practitioner, Michelle hears the voice of those who feel unheard and is committed to providing a safe, nurturing space for healing and expansion. That is marvelous. I mean, I want to talk with you some more anyways. To go into. It's fantastic. So you came out of a lot of what I call holdbacks, a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
And I know that in the sort of masculinized straight culture, actually just the masculinized culture, I'm not even going to say it's just straight. We have this idea that we're supposed to be like people are in the movies where they go, oh, I've got a problem. Ta-da, I'm out of it. We women tend to follow the toxic masculine rules. We've learned them so well. We have learned them in order to survive. But the problem is that, as you know, when we are going into all of this way of living that is toxic, we just draw more toxicity to us. And you have come out of that entire systemic way of thinking and feeling and living. And would you talk to us a little bit about what your journey started as and what it looks like a little bit more now?
Sure. Well, to get a full picture, we got to go a little far back to my childhood, which was actually quite idyllic. I grew up in a lovely neighborhood with a family that, we had certainly their inherited, maladaptations and stuff like that, but there was
Sure.
love and great affection in my house. So I was very blessed. But my father died very unexpectedly when I was 14, which really changed everything in an instant. It was really hard, and I decided I was going to be the strong one for the family. So, at 14, 15, I'm working part-time, helping to, support the family, doing, at least supporting myself. So I was taking some of the burden off my mom and, really just being strong. Fast forward, I lost both grandmothers, and then when I was 26, I was living with my grandfather, who was, everyone should have that one person in your life that you can do no wrong in front of. Well, that was my grandfather, and
Aw.
I discovered him deceased one morning. So, yeah,
Wow.
a lot of loss, a lot of trauma, and that all primed me for um, spiritually. I had been very drawn to the earth-based religions, although I had been raised in 12 years in Catholic school, so I definitely got indoctrinated. But I was very drawn to the earth religions, and I was practicing witchcraft and paganism and Wicca, and trying to find my way when some people from a fundamentalist Christian cult came into my life.
Oh boy.
And yeah, and they had the answers. They knew what was going to happen after we died. They knew what I had to do to get reunited with my family. They knew they just had all the right things to say for what my aching soul needed at that moment in time.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and it's only in great retrospect that I can see now, because for a long time I beat myself up like, how did you, of all people, end up in a cult? It It can happen. And then they're a
Yeah,
borderline mainstream cult. They are sort of mainstream, but definitely culty behavior when I was involved with them. So, um, and ultimately, I think that situation primed me for my abusive marriage because I left the church to marry this man. I really believed that women should, be submissive. And even though I had been a women's studies major, I was like a professional feminist there, really. but but
a
I got all turned
professional
around.
feminist. I love that.
but I got all turned around, and I truly thought it was my punishment for leaving God was to be abused in this marriage, which has kept me stuck for a while. And then I had children, and that kept me in a position where I just didn't have the courage to leave or the wherewithal to leave or the community. That is a key part of that. I have my family, but I didn't have community.
The
Um,
big problem, I think, for us women is that we get so inside the system and the structure that exactly what happened to you is what happens to us, no matter what it looks like externally, which is this idea that I can't, like, I don't have the power to do whatever it is. That seems
Absolutely.
like what you're talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely. If there's one word I could use to describe those years, it would be disempowered, very much
Right.
so. It
Right.
all came to a head when my ex-husband, during a psychotic episode, tried to run me down with a van on Mother's Day in 2012. And, I think the universe had to really make it dramatic for me because I kept not seeing it. I kept being like, this is fine. I can deal. I know how to handle his triggers. I know how to soothe him. I know how to prevent the big blow ups.
Right.
Um, and that even after that, I worked with him for a while to try to repair the marriage, get him on the right medications, but he refused to stay on the right meds and he just devolved further and it became, increasingly dangerous. Um, that launched me into a 4 year long, very scary divorce, a lot of stalking, a lot of restraining orders. But during that time is when I discovered Reiki and energy healing. And I
Aha.
sort of got back to reading about the divine feminine and, looking at, I always love the archetypes. I've always been drawn to the work of Carl Jung. So, when I was like, oh, I need spirituality in my life. And I certainly don't want to go back to a strict religion. But I remember how I felt when I was honoring the earth, when I was honoring the cycles, when I was just living more in touch with what is. And so those two things kind of converged, and it was a lifeline, a doorway, just one of those signs when you turn on your path and like all the neon lights are pointing like this way, this way. So, um, and that launched me on my second part of my healing journey because I did do some healing work back. When I was doing the earth-based religions, I did some trauma healing, but not to the extent I've done in the past 12 years now. But
Well, let me ask you a question. The thing that always convinces me of the truth of something, um, and also of the lie of something, is how it makes me feel. If it makes me feel strengthened or weakened. Um, Now, the journey that you took coming away from I got nothing to, ooh, I like Reiki, I like Jung, I like all these things. Was that like, were you aware at the time that that was a huge shift?
I don't even think so. It's interesting. I think what happened, and another piece of it, as I had been very sick, I had a lot of autoimmune disorders. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. There was a lot of physical
Hmm.
illness to deal with, and I think I started to go through a period of feeling better, and it was like my soul just sort of sparked out some things in my consciousness, and I don't think I ever really saw what a huge, to me it was like I was scrabbling for shore, like a drowning person. I'm like, I
Right.
gotta find something to hold on to, something that's going to give me a little hope, a little pleasure, a little that tingly feeling, like you were saying, when you know things are right. I
Yeah, and
yearn for
for
that.
me, it's like when I've been really, really, when I was in a lot of mental illness, I just needed a reason to keep breathing.
Yeah, yeah,
Honestly, like let's get down to the nitty gritty about it because that's hard enough for anybody who's got any kind of autoimmune or mental or whatever it is, physical. Um, but it's just, it takes a heck of a lot of, actually, it takes a lot of fierce feminine to keep going.
yes.
It takes that flexibility. So kudos to you. But I
Mm.
interrupted you. Go ahead. From there, you went where?
So it, was little stepping stones along the pathway. Got into sacred sexuality for a while and reclaimed my sexuality and my divine feminine, which was so wonderful.
Oh my
I
goodness.
started, dabbling here and there in breath work and learning different breath work techniques and somatic embodiment techniques. And, you know, each one gave me back a little bit more. And then in recent years, I have been reclaiming my inner artist because I had gone to art school, but I
Yes.
hadn't done art in 25 years, but I've been painting again and just reclaiming these little joys and these little things that, I can now actually feel in my body because for a while I didn't have that feeling because my body wasn't a safe place. So
Right.
now that I can actually drop into my body and be like, all right, is this something that I should explore? And I get answers and it's amazing, and it's, yeah, it's been piece by
Wow.
piece though. It's not been like one thing, but if I could point to one thing that really did quite a bit was learning Reiki, learning energetic boundaries, and how to do the self healing work was really pivotal for me.
I don't think, honestly, that we women have any real concept of just how stripped we've been of our true selves and of our of the naturalness of our true power, which is energetic and emotional and intuitive and instinctive and fierce. I mean, men like to posture and like they run the world, but I'm sorry, you can't do anything that they're doing if you didn't have your spouse behind you. And
Yeah.
so much more often than not, just by the percentages of hetero over queer, most of the times it's a woman. And it's an amazing thing to see us start to take our power back. You talked about, or in the introduction I mentioned Jungian tarot. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's one of my great passions. I love my tarot readings and oracle readings. I do it in the same way. I approach these as energetic snapshots of a moment in time. I'm not so much divining the future, although, certainly the energy of what's coming down the pike will come in, but
Hmm.
I'm not going to tell you specifics. That's for, you to experience and magically so. But I can help you get still and listen to your own intuition, listen to your own voice. When I pull a card for somebody, I'll give them my, what the symbols mean to me or what sparks for me and what I know of, the meaning of the card. And then we always turn it to like, well, what sparks for you? Because you are the one that
Mm.
is in communion with yourself, and that's my greatest joy is helping people get into greater communion with themselves. So, we really go deep and it's really into the shadow side. We pull from the parts that we don't look at. We get down and dirty, but it's also fun. And that's the thing that I love about them. Like I always end up laughing during them because it's whenever you're working with spirit, even if it's heavy, there's going to be some humor in it and there's going to be some
Humor.
lightheartedness. So but it's fun. It's a moment to just get still, to connect with your intuition, connect with your shadow, and sort of I call them inner path
Yes.
tarot readings because it helps orient you on your
Ooh,
inner path.
I love that title. That is brilliant.
Thank you.
Because you hear, if you're anywhere around the spiritual communities, you hear it always, the answers lie within.
Yeah.
And the natural question early in my spiritual walk was like, well, where?
Mm,
How do I find them? What? Because I hadn't yet made room within myself to go from that, human only to the human, which is encased in the spirit which is our, or if you don't like the word spirit, then you can call it the energy,
Yep.
which is our true being, is what I've discovered.
Yep.
Um,
And I feel so many of those messages when people feel disconnected. One of the first things I'd like to do is to get them back connected to their body and their energy right here in their soma, because I believe firmly that the universe speaks to us through our subconscious, and our subconscious speaks to us through our body. So it's like a pipeline, to get those and to learn to I forget the word I was going to use, but anyway, interpret. That's the word, interpret
okay.
those signals. It's
Yeah.
it's beautiful, and yeah, like
Do
I
you
see great
find,
transformations
oh my
just by
God,
people getting still.
my favorite word, transformation. So when you get people still, they can suddenly tap in, even if they're feeling really wounded and they haven't done a whole lot of work, or do you find that I find it's easier if people are somewhat aware, but even somewhat aware people can be really resistant. So it just depends on the person.
I think, yeah, yeah, it really does depend on the person. And I think for certain people, you have to kind of get an even further view, an even further view. Like for some people, I could come in and be like, drop into your body, breathe into it. Where do you feel constriction? They'll know what I'm saying. Some people don't have that languaging. They aren't at that
Right.
point. So for them, I'll be like, well, what do you feel like? Is it tight? Is it loose? And what does that, bring up for you? But it can be a process. It's not, it's simple, not easy. It's
100%. Yep. Um, there was something that you and I had talked about when we first connected, and you said, and I'm going to quote you in a second, but you said that you're introducing people to their inner divinity. And you said this quote, it's not a binary, it's a symbiotic flow of divinity.
mm.
And I just swooned a little because that's gorgeous. Can you talk about that symbiotic flow of divinity and how you think people might get there, or start that journey, or start to approach to get towards that journey?
Ooh, um, yeah, it's so I find it hard to language some of this, and I think that's the beauty of
Yeah,
this work, is that it's work beyond language. It's experiential, it's visceral. But there is, I don't, I believe that we are the divine and the divine is us. I believe 100% that,
yeah,
even when I'm teaching a new class of Reiki students, and we'll talk about connecting to Reiki, but like I was telling them, like, no, you're really just connecting to your higher self, because you are the energy. The energy is you. You're not different. And it flows in and out beautifully when we can, be a clear channel, when we can work through those human blocks and, you know, maladaptations and other,
right.
physical illnesses, all those little barriers that come between us and that beautiful other part of us. But yeah, I truly believe it is just interwoven, and it's never ending, always flowing. And then it also can extrapolate to the divine feminine and the divine masculine. I'm queer, and to me, I struggle with binary thinking. I'm like,
Right,
you
right.
know, and I think it's shifting. I do hear more and more people talking about it as being a
A continuum, maybe.
gradient, a continuum. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
that is something I've noticed in probably the past 3 or 4 years more so. So, maybe we're shifting the language around it. It's tough stuff. You want to use the language that the world can understand, because you need to relate on one level, but at the
right.
same time the language is limiting, and that it's not quite saying what you need it to say.
Language is a big deal in my world, and it has held us down as women, um, of color, of not color, queer, straight, whatever, name it, name the panoply of, feminine. But I really, I think that what's troubling me these days is that as we keep walking further and further into this period in history, which I consider to be the Great Awakening, uh, I'm seeing a lot of calls for people to be aware of how trans people are struggling, which they are, and queer people are struggling and immigrants are struggling, and but what I don't hear in that list is women. And I think just as a group, and I think that the way that we see ourselves in this culture, we've taken it as a given instead of as
Mm,
something that we can actually challenge, not fight, but inside our own being, with something like tarot or with the work that I do with
right.
people, um, to walk into its opposite. So that's what I do is
Mm,
instead of, oh, let's look at what hurts, let's see what feels good. Let's see what the opposite is and see if we can manifest that feeling within you. Um, but how do you deal with that whole situation of being both queer and a woman, both of which are considered minorities, even though women really run the world behind the scenes?
it's a factor. It's definitely less so. I've always just embraced being queer. I think for me, no, actually, that's not true at all. I embraced my queerness after my marriage, but the minute I embraced it fully and just like, this is me. Like once
This
I
is, yeah.
looked at things as a possibility, like, oh, Michelle, and it was like, oh, of course. Why have I not seen this? And conditioning was why I had
Yeah,
not seen this. And
yeah,
interestingly, I talked to a lot of older queer women, and many of us, similar story, many of us. So I find that fascinating. Um,
similar in terms of having been married to a man, and then
After the
or the
marriage,
abusive part also.
often that will be a factor, but not always. But I do hear a
Yeah,
lot of older, women of our age,
yeah,
queer women saying that, yeah, I didn't know I was queer until I was 42 or 50 or, 60. It's pretty amazing. But I
I
cheer for each one because they're reclaiming parts of themselves, and that just makes me
right.
so happy.
Well, my journey has been a largely heterosexual one, but as I get older, I find that I don't not I shouldn't put it that way. As I started moving into my 40s, actually, so this is quite a bit ago, sadly, um, I suddenly didn't know that I wanted to define anything about me. Now, I don't mean that I
Mm,
wanted to have people call me they, and I didn't want to, and that wasn't a thing, 20 some years ago, but I just did it like it seemed to me that the reason at that time that I wanted to have a man in my life was to to say, okay, somebody wants you, you're good enough kind of thing. And so as long as I felt that way, I was like, that's not the place I want to come from.
right,
So
right.
what is the place? I mean, maybe we could talk about, what is that place that we can come from as women, no matter what our orientation or even lack of, if somebody has that. What is the place? How do we look at this need to have somebody in our life, but we don't want the same toxic setups that we've attracted before? I don't have the
Ooh,
answer to this. It's just a topic
no.
to look at together.
I would say one of the key elements is community. I think one of the ways that our society
Yeah,
really kind of misses the mark is that we expect our partner to be everything to us. And I think that that is so inherently unhealthy. Um,
yeah,
so I think even, spreading, like having community of trusted women friends, which I know is a hard thing for a lot of women. But even having community, if you're a young parent, what in whatever area, having those people around you that are kind of doing the same thing you are is so uplifting. I think
yeah.
that's a big piece of it. I think that gives you back a piece of your empowerment because they can hold up a mirror. Like, because we in ourselves will think something is okay. Like for me, I didn't even realize my marriage was all that abusive, until,
Yeah, yeah.
years later when I was talking to people, I'm like, no, girl, no. you know, So
Yeah,
sometimes you need someone else to hold up that mirror for you. And I think that that's one of the antidotes to,
I agree completely. I think the other one is something I believe you mentioned a little earlier, which is boundaries.
oh, yes.
And boundaries, I've had a long journey with boundaries, and it's always a shifting sand thing, but it's always a forward moving thing. So I'm okay with that. And at first I thought boundaries was like, like, don't
Yep.
anybody come in, like if you do something bad, I don't want to know you. Um, and then what it's morphed into over the years is a sense of being able to judge emotionally if I have, um, what's the word I'm looking for? If I'm proud of me, if I'm doing
Mm.
and being somebody that I'm proud of, that I'm happy to be me.
Oops. I lost your audio.
What happened? You did.
I can't hear you at all.
Oh no.
Oh, now you're back.
Oh, good. Okay.
That was odd.
That was interesting. Yeah, somebody doesn't want me to say that. Yeah. Um, it was Jung. Jung said, "Let me talk. I want to say something." Um, I don't know much about Jung except that he was intensely spiritual. I love that.
He was, and I'm hearing, unfortunately, that he was also had his darker side from friends that know better. So I need to look at him in a more culturally appropriate lens. And it's work I need to do, and I've been hesitating doing because I know it's going to shift some profound things for me, but it is something I need to do.
Yeah, that's another kind of
Oh,
boundary to me. Like, did you lose me again? Can't hear me? How about now? Can you hear
I
me?
can hear you now. You know, this
Okay.
happens when I get into really deeply spiritual conversations. I short out electronics. I swear to God.
I be I believe it clearly. Believe you.
My ex-husband, we had a running joke. Whenever he was working on the computer, I wasn't allowed in the room. He's like, "No, you short things out."
I've known people who like they can't wear watches because they'll
Yeah,
they'll die. They can't do
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's very strange.
It's a really interesting thing. Yeah, yeah. Um, so we were talking about, yes, I wanted to say that I've come across some really powerful leaders, like spiritual leaders. Um, and there's only one of them that I've met in the flesh that no, two of them that I'm like, I can trust you. I know who you are
Mm,
and I can trust you. And the others have shown themselves to be people with a high message, but under the
yeah,
surface. So really, for especially for us women, we are really trained in the I don't have the wisdom, I'll just believe you. I'll just put my power in your hands. It goes so global for us. And so I think being aware of that is another way to look at any relationship. I mean, I can remember back in my 20s, if I met somebody, then I would just jump in bed with them because I thought that's what I needed to do to be accepted.
and
That was what I needed to do.
exactly, and we externalize our authority, our sovereignty. You know, we put it in the hands
Yeah,
of other people, and
yeah,
and in our society, let's be honest, it's typically we put it in the hands of the men around us. That's
right,
that's it. I even think of like women's folk medicine, how disregarded it is when studies are now showing that no, they knew all along what to do. They may not have
right,
had like the technical knowledge of what it was doing, but they knew the benefits.
right.
And I find that interesting. I had a friend, we used to always say that, I need the white man stamp of approval on this one, because that is our mentality.
And yeah, and it's not even the white man, it's like
No,
any man.
it's man.
And that's just, and I'm very aware of that sort of knee jerk in me, but I've done enough of the work that I don't allow myself to come from that place. And then when I have the time, I can do the work to actually transform that. Um, but it's like a spider web, just goes out there. What would you
Absolutely.
say? What would you say to somebody who's been in your situation, who's been so wounded and disempowered? What's the most important thing that you
Ooh.
could say to advise to them to do? What first step to take?
Make sure you're safe physically, and
For
then
real,
do what you need to do to make sure you're safe mentally. And those right there are huge because when you're in a tough situation, I mean, those are the hardest steps. But and then self-compassion, because I think one of the first things when you come out is and you're kind of starting to get on the other side, you're like, well, why did I allow this? And we tend to beat ourselves up. So I think viewing
right?
ourselves with compassion and knowing that even more in the thick of it, you're doing what you need to do to survive, and that is to be applauded because you're doing it. You know, it may be messy, it may be imperfect, it may not be ideal, but you're doing what you need to do to get through. And maybe
Right.
that's all the resources you have internally and externally at the moment. Just, getting through to the next minute. But as soon as you can, get safe, and learn boundaries, learn learn that you're a sovereign, valuable human being. You know,
My goodness. Yes. And it so often it is get safe and then find boundaries, because
yeah,
if you use your power, if you're in a very abusive relationship, it's just it has runs the risk of being far more violent.
yeah,
And you don't need to prove that you are as big a badass as your partner thinks that
right.
he or she is. Yeah, I knew a woman out in California who is queer, and she was in an abusive relationship with another woman. So it really is about
Oh yeah.
learning that we have value. I'm not going to use the word worth, because as a dear friend of mine, Dr. Bernie Sewell, says, she lives in Wales, and she says, you are worth. You're not worthy, you are worth. When you were a little, she
Mm,
goes, when you were a little baby in the bassinet, and your mother, assuming that your mother was somebody who cared about you, looked at you and went, oh my God, you're perfect. Oh, my sweet baby. She didn't go, are you worthy of this attention I'm giving you? No,
mm,
no. And we still have that. We came in with, we are worth. And I love that.
mm. I heard one speaker, and it moved me deeply. It's like, if you put three babies on the stage, which one has more worth? Which one's more worthy? Yeah,
None. Wow.
yeah. And I loved that example. That really spoke to me. And it's speaking what you're saying reminds me so much of that beautiful. We come in full of worth.
Wow. So the work you do connecting people with themselves sounds like the crux of it is that when you have a sense of who you are, you're not going to just sit there and go, I got nothing, take whatever you want from me.
Right.
Does that put it correctly, or am I off?
Exactly. It's a way to reclaim your self sovereignty, to really, everyone's like stand in your power, but it is standing in your power, but it is all the little steps to get there. It's the micro steps along the way that
Right,
I really love helping people with, the like, oh my gosh, I get to reclaim this part of my childhood, or oh my gosh, you mean that silly little interest I have is worth, investigating? Just seeing them like explore who they are is
right.
so beautiful.
It gives them a different, completely different quality of life, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
it
really,
changes their
that's,
capacity.
yes, it's completely different from the rock that I kept falling over for so long, which is I want to start a business, but it has to be something that's going to pay me a lot of money. It's like, no,
Mm,
no, 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 no. I know that this is a big thing, but you can't start from there. And that's really hard to let go of that masculine, like, let's focus on the goal. No, I want to focus on the gestation. I want to focus on the little 1%
mm,
steps. And I want to focus on how I shift my quality of life every
yeah,
day,
yeah.
in how I speak with myself and how I approach other people, and whether I approach people who I shouldn't
Mm.
be approaching, or approach those I should.
It's interesting. My word of the year, well, I have two, but the main word of my year that I'm really carrying with me is the word presence. And it's that very
Hmm.
idea of just fully embodying this moment in time and being fully present in it, fully conscious, making those conscious choices and decisions, and really engaging with life in a way that I probably haven't in a while, because it's very easy to get back on autopilot, especially when you're neurodiverse. It's like, oh, I'll just let that part of the brain, do what it's doing, and I'm going to go over here and look at butterflies. So it's definitely to really shift my focus into the moment, into expanding into the moment is really. um, what I'm where my path is taking me right now, and it's slowing things down.
And isn't it beautiful? And I am a speed freak. I type
Mm-hmm.
like 130 words a minute, and I'm just like, I'm a speed freak. But I've learned how to stop doing that all the time. And it's amazing. Suddenly my life is full.
Yes.
It's not done. It's not like, okay, I got it dialed in. I can go back to sleep now. No, it's completely the opposite. But it's not this idea of like, okay, now I have to work really hard to stay there. No, it's like, it's just not the masculine way. Do you think we can bottle this or at least define it for people and keep expanding the understanding and bring it to other women?
No, I do. I do think it, and
I
I
do
think
too.
as you were saying earlier, the Great Awakening. I think that is so true. I think a lot of women, in particular, and even in the business world, I'm hearing more and more that are tired of hustle culture. They're tired of bro languaging. They're looking for another way. So I think
Yep.
there's a calling there. There's a universal calling that is happening, and
Yeah.
people are women are starting to shift and attune to it, and
Yeah.
it's really quite powerful to see, actually.
It's amazing to watch. I catch women on TikTok, mostly, embodying this and having like having channels and communities around. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna settle for garbage.
Yeah.
And watching the responses from particularly the younger men, I haven't seen many from the older men, although I'm sure it's similar. Just because once you've been in a place of not empowerment, privilege,
Mm.
and you don't see it, when you start to see it's you don't want to see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Any group is like, no, I don't want to. No, that means I've been being stupid.
Right.
Yep,
Right.
yep. Um, I forgot where I was going with that thought, but yeah, I forget where I was going.
It'll come back, maybe.
It'll come back maybe. So, and speaking of neurodivergent, could you define that for me? I hear the
I
term, but I don't know what it means.
It means people whose brains aren't quote unquote neurotypical, which is anyone with autism, ADHD,
Okay.
other brain people that process life a little differently than the average brain. Um, we tend to have I can't speak to all. I have one of my children, well, actually, all three of my children are autistic. But one of them has shared her experience more with me. So I don't want to
Mhm.
speak for her, but I know for me, I have ADHD and pretty intense case of it. And it's like so many thoughts per moment. And it's chatter,
Yes.
chatter, 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 chatter. Like literally when I am in a restaurant, I can hear all the conversations going on around me. And
Whoa.
I'm like, and I start listening, not meaning to, but it's like, whoa, it's like I cannot just stay focused on the moment. So my work of recent years is learning to control that and really learning to be focused in the moment and stay present. Just stay present with the moment. Um,
That is extraordinary. Because to me, because I know that I'm always reading the emotional set points of other people. And hello, so here comes the cat. The emotional set points of other people. And I'm always thinking in a spiritual or energetic fashion at the same time as I'm crafting my words, um, or not, deciding, hey, however it lands is how it lands. But I always have those two things going on. I don't know if that's considered neurodivergent or not, but I do think that when we talk about going out of our minds, it reminds me of what somebody said a long time ago, and I forget who, but they said actually what's happening is we're going into our minds. And that's what
yes.
makes us crazy.
And much like you, I can very much feel the energetic set point of the people around me.
Right.
And until I learned in Reiki really good energetic boundaries, it was really intense. Like I had a hard time in public. I had a hard time like navigating life because I would be feeling if somebody would sit next to me on the bus and all of a sudden I'm depressed. I'm like, what's going on here? Like it was just up and down.
Wow.
That is not an issue anymore, thank goodness. But it took
Wow.
really learning those energetic boundaries. And yeah, so I could definitely relate to that.
Do you teach people Reiki?
I do. I have a class going right now, brand new cohort that just started a week ago, and they're wonderful, and I'm thrilled.
Well, would you tell us how we can get in touch with you? Anybody who wants to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. I am Michelle Manley on Facebook, and it's my picture, so easy to find. It's Mystic Healing Alchemy, either Facebook group called Mystic Healing Alchemy or my Instagram page is Mystic Healing Alchemy, which is the business name. I do have a website. It's michellemmanley.com/home, HOME, and that'll bring you to my freebie, which is actually really simple. It's 5 very simple micro step little rituals you can do throughout your day to connect to your energy. Like it's, I tried to make it as reachable for everybody.
Right.
Because
That's
I do
beautiful.
believe it's those little steps. Just take those little turns towards, expanding into the moment, towards feeling the energies and towards feeling your body and, and towards consciously navigating your life.
I think you are a big beacon of hope for people who feel like they can't get to a better place, because I think you're showing that it's not about going from I'm broke to having $1 million in a personal growth way. It is that look, I just walked forward and I found, and here I am.
Yes. And the other thing I really would like people to take away from my story, it was 6 years in the cult, 12 years in a marriage. Don't commit to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time doing it. And I just really, really, it's okay. Even if you've been stuck in it for a while, there is another side.
Right. You had said that to me, that it's tough, it's hard to get to the other side, and it's completely worth it. And you also talked to me about knowing that you're not stuck in the wounds.
Yes.
I think I'd
Yes.
like to have you just say a quick something about that as well, because we do think that, oh God, this is me and I'm never going to get rid of it and I'm doomed. So can you tell
Absolutely.
people
I
how that
feel much like a physical wound, these deep soul wounds, they're cyclical. There are layers to it. And you may come back, butt up against the same wound in different scenarios and in different ways, but each time you're a different person each time. You have more skill set and a greater capacity. Perhaps you have more resourced at some point, and how you interact with that wound is part of the healing process. So it can be very easy to feel like, well, I'm really stuck in my wound because I just keep doing the same thing.
right.
But it may not be quite that simple. And if you are stuck in the womb, then make those little incremental steps. Just don't make it so big. Don't make it so hard. Just little shifts built on little shifts built on little shifts.
That was something I struggled with a long time until I realized that what is said about the small positive, more positive than the moment before by this much, is that
Mm,
it's 10,000 times stronger than the dark.
yeah, yeah,
And when you're doing it deliberately, and that is your intention, is to just shift by this much, you win. You've done it. You can
yeah,
feel it. You know it's happened. You don't
yeah,
go back.
yeah. And it's true. I think of it like when you turn and face the sun and you feel the warmth of it. And it's just like,
Mhm.
on one of those, chilly days, but the sun is warm, like how it feels when you turn to face that light. And
Oh,
that's, you know, the essence of it.
what a visceral description. Oh, thank you. I'm carrying that one with me. That's awesome. Well, thank you a million, Miss Shell. Should I call you Shelly or Michelle? I haven't decided.
Either
Hmm.
is fine.
Maybe I'll just call you darling. Nah, that's very southern because I'm from Ohio, so we're right next to Kentucky, and we all talk like this sometimes.
I have a Boston accent that comes out periodically.
Oh my God. I lived there for a while. Um, so again, thank you very much. And we'll do this again, I hope, because
Absolutely. This has
you're
been
awesome.
wonderful.
And then we'll do something together and we'll just keep opening the world along with the other women who are doing exactly the same thing. for us.
Amen to that.
Lots of love to you. And to all of you watching, love to you and Moxie, because we need that Moxie. And see you next time. Bye now.